Sorry for the poor lighting. So here we're going to lift up our electric motor, see if we can get it to fit without the coupler, without the clutch. Without anything else, just to see if whether we can get the motor maneuvered. So this space in here is 21 inches wide, and the motor is 20 3/4. So in order to get it to fit in there, the shaft on the opposite side of the motor, it's like 1 3/4 inches. So once you've got everything lined up, it will fit in underneath this this fender. But getting the whole mechanism in there and getting it lined up onto the transmission with these bolts and stuff, basically what I'm doing is dropping this part of the engine down in, getting the tail shaft into the fender space, and then bringing it back over and lining it up. I'm doing this without the coupler and the clutch, just to see whether I have any hope of getting it done. I guess so. So here you're looking at the tail end of the motor shaft, and that's really not enough light. Okay, there. Oh, excellent. The LED isn't synchronized. You can sort of see the tail shaft touching the side of the fender. So what we're going to have to do, what I'm going to have to do, is cut a slot in the fender and put the fender back together afterwards. I sort of thought that this might be the case, but I guess I wanted to confirm it. So even with the tilt, we're not going to get this sucker in. Unless we make some space. So there we have the motor level. The motor housing itself clears this edge, and we got room for maybe, I'm going to say, 1 inch of shaft. And besides that, this other inch of shaft will be sticking into the fender well. Forward of the steering, perhaps interfering with maximum steering, so we may end up chopping a portion of this shaft off. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out when we decide whether it fits at all. This keyed shaft is intended to be used for running auxiliary equipment like the power steering pump, for example, but it's not really set up to run the power steering pump. It's a drain all the time. This is the power steering pump. This is the air conditioning. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that it's going to be hard to get it in there. So on this side, past this plate, there's an additional 3 inches of flywheel, clutch plate, pressure plate, have to be fit into this transmission housing while everything else is connected. And even better, we have to be able to turn the shaft or wiggle it a little bit in order to get the splines to engage. So this is definitely going to be tough to do. The other option, of course, was to bring the transmission, take out the CV joints and the axles, and bring the whole transmission out and get it coupled to the motor and the clutch and stuff, and then drop the whole thing in. There are mounts in the way to do that. It is looking like that's possibly what I'm going to have to do, but I guess I'm not going to do that until I establish that I have to, because I'm not exactly a mechanic, and there's a whole lot of stuff connected to the transmission that I would rather not actually take apart. So the things that are hard to take out, or hard for me to take out, I guess, are the transmission, because of all the different connections, the mounts, popping out the CV joints, that kind of stuff. So that's difficult for me. The air conditioning is difficult for me just because well, it's not my expertise, and it may end up coming out, but it doesn't look to be in the way of anything. The power steering, it's just as easy to leave it in as to take it out. The big thing here is I've just realized that the fan unit and the radiator are not hard to take out, and they're not connected to too many things. So the chances of me getting it back in there and actually having it work are decent. So the latest plan is to take this and get it in here, lower it down until this shaft clears the fender, swing it back under, and then line up the clutch and the splines. Not my first choice, but the 9-inch net gain is smaller. It measures out at 16 inches here instead of 17 1/4, and it's 18 1/2 total instead of just over 19 3/8. So there's 3/4 of an inch if you include the shaft, and if you don't include the shaft, we've got a good inch, inch and a quarter that we would save. So it would be much easier, not a walk in the park, but still much easier to get this this unit in if it was a 9-inch net gain instead of an 11-inch. Well, after discussing it with my wife, we've come to the conclusion that that's just not going to work, what I was planning to do. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to take these parts. This transmission has several supports. One of them is here. One is here in behind the fan, and then there's this one, which is to the fender. So we're going to take these two off, and basically there's another one which is sort of like a shock absorber, I guess. Anyway, those two and this one, and there may be one more in there. Not sure if this one is or not. what it looks like it might be. There's another connection there. So we'll take all those off and get this transmission tilted up. If I can get it to about 25-30 degrees, my hope is that I can get the motor put together with the clutch and everything and slide it in this way and have it made up with the transmission without removing all of the cables and the connectors and the various bolts and stuff that have to do with the transmission. So because my mechanical aptitude isn't very high, I'm going to try and get this done without actually taking the transmission out, which I understand may end up being more work than just taking it out, but I'm going to give it a shot.